On a dark, distant planet, the air was thick with tension. The sky was a deep shade of purple, and strange sounds echoed through the rocky landscape. This was a place where fear lived, and it was home to the Zorathians, a cruel alien race known for their wickedness. They had captured many humans, but none were as brave as Lyra. Lyra was a young woman with bright blue eyes and long, dark hair that flowed like silk. She had been taken from her home during a raid, and now she was trapped in a cold, dark cell. The walls were damp and rough, and the only light came from flickering bulbs above. She sat on the floor, trying to keep her heart steady. She had heard stories about the Zorathians and their terrible ways. They were known for their painful tortures, but Lyra was determined not to give in to fear. She wrapped her arms around her knees and took a deep breath. "I will not break," she whispered to herself. Lyra thought of her family back on Earth, of the warm sunlight and the laughter they shared. She closed her eyes, imagining her mother's comforting voice. It was a small comfort, but it helped her hold on to hope. Suddenly, the heavy door creaked open. Light flooded the room, and two Zorathians entered. They were tall and menacing, with green skin and sharp teeth that glinted in the light. They spoke in a harsh language, their voices like nails on a chalkboard. Lyra's heart raced as they approached her, and she braced herself for what was to come. "Prepare for the games," one of them growled, his eyes gleaming with malice. Lyra knew what that meant. The games were their way of torturing humans, testing their limits and breaking their spirits. She clenched her fists, refusing to show weakness. But just as the aliens were about to grab her, the ground shook with a loud explosion. The door of the cell burst open, and a human figure dashed inside. It was Marcus, a soldier sent to rescue her. He was tall and strong, wearing a dark suit of armor that gleamed even in the dim light. His eyes were filled with determination. "Lyra, come with me," he shouted. She couldn't believe her eyes. Relief flooded over her, and she sprang to her feet. "You found me," she cried, hope shining through her fear. Marcus quickly scanned the room, and the Zorathians turned their attention to him. "Get back," he warned, stepping between them and Lyra. He moved with the grace of a predator, ready to fight. The Zorathians hissed, their sharp claws ready to strike. Without hesitation, Marcus charged forward. He tackled one of the aliens, using his strength to throw it against the wall. The other Zorathian lunged at him, but Marcus was faster. He dodged the attack and delivered a powerful kick that sent the creature sprawling to the ground. Lyra watched in awe. She had never seen anyone fight like this before. Marcus was like a whirlwind, moving with speed and skill. The Zorathians were strong, but Marcus was smarter. He used the environment to his advantage, leading the aliens into traps and using their own strength against them. "Come on, Lyra. We have to go," he called, glancing back at her. She nodded, her fear replaced with courage. Lyra followed Marcus as he led her out of the cell and into the narrow hallways of the alien base. The walls were cold and dark, but she felt a spark of hope. She was not alone anymore. As they ran, they could hear the Zorathians yelling and chasing after them. Lyra's heart raced, but Marcus kept encouraging her. "You can do this. Just stay close." They turned corners and ducked under low ceilings. The sounds of the aliens grew louder behind them, echoing through the halls. Lyra felt a rush of adrenaline. She was running for her life, and it felt exhilarating. She had always been told that humans were weak, but here she was, escaping with a brave soldier by her side. Finally, they reached a large door that led to an empty room. Marcus pushed it open and pulled Lyra inside. "We need a plan," he said, panting. "If we can get to the ship, we can escape." Lyra looked around. The room was filled with strange machinery and screens. She felt a little lost, but Marcus's presence gave her strength. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady. "We have to disable the security system. That will buy us some time," he replied, his eyes scanning the controls. Lyra watched as he began to work on the machines, his fingers flying over the buttons. She felt a swell of admiration for him. He was not just a soldier. He was a hero, and she realized she wanted to be strong too. Just then, they heard loud footsteps approaching. "They're coming," Marcus exclaimed, his voice tense. Lyra's heart raced, but she refused to let fear take over. She was ready to fight. Together, they could escape. "I'm with you," she said, determination shining in her eyes. As the door began to shake, Lyra knew this was just the beginning. She was no longer a captive. She was a fighter. And with Marcus by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The rescue. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she and Marcus stood in the dimly lit room. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder outside the door. The Zorathians were coming. She glanced at Marcus, who was focused on the console in front of him. His brow was furrowed with concentration, and she could see the determination in his eyes. "Almost there," Marcus muttered, his fingers moving quickly across the buttons. Lyra felt a mix of fear and excitement. She had never imagined she would be running from aliens, let alone with a human soldier who was so brave. Suddenly, the door rattled violently, and Lyra jumped. "Hurry," she urged, her voice rising in panic. She could hear the Zorathians shouting in their harsh language, and she knew they would not stop until they found them. "I just need a few more seconds," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. He focused on the screen, and Lyra could see lines of code flashing rapidly. The door shook again, and the sound of claws scraping against metal sent a shiver down her spine. She stepped closer to Marcus, feeling the urge to protect him even though he was the one rescuing her. "What if they get in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They won't," Marcus said firmly. "Trust me." His confidence reassured her, even as the door shook once more. With one final press of a button, the console beeped, and the screen lit up with green lights. "Got it," Marcus exclaimed, and the door slid open with a hiss. But instead of the calm outside, they were met with chaos. A group of Zorathians had just arrived, their eyes wild with rage. They spotted Marcus and Lyra, and roared in anger. Without thinking, Marcus grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her into the corridor. "Run," he shouted, leading her down the narrow hallway. The bright lights flickered overhead as they sprinted, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Lyra felt adrenaline surge through her. She was running for her life, and it felt powerful. They dashed through the winding corridors, and Lyra glanced back to see the Zorathians closing in. She pushed herself harder, matching Marcus's pace. They turned a corner, and Lyra nearly collided with a wall. Marcus quickly guided her, keeping her on track. "This way," he shouted, pulling her toward a side door. They burst through it, and found themselves in a large storage room filled with crates and strange alien objects. "Hide," Marcus urged, and they ducked behind a stack of crates just as the Zorathians burst into the room. Lyra held her breath, her heart racing. She could hear the aliens searching, their voices angry and harsh. Marcus pressed against her, and she could feel his body tense. He looked at her, his eyes wide with intensity. "We have to be quiet," he whispered. Lyra nodded, trying to still her breathing. The Zorathians were getting closer, their claws scraping against the crates as they searched for them. She could see their green skin and sharp teeth, and a chill ran down her spine. "Where are they?" One of the Zorathians growled, clearly frustrated. "They must be here." Marcus glanced around, his mind working quickly. He pointed to a small vent in the corner of the room. "We can escape through there," he said. Lyra's eyes widened. "But it's too small for you." "I'll make it work," he replied, determination in his voice. "You go first. I'll follow." With a quick nod, Lyra crawled toward the vent. It was tight, and she had to squeeze through, but she was driven by the need to escape. As she pulled herself through, She heard the Zorathians growing more agitated. "Check the vents," one of them shouted. Lyra's heart sank. They were running out of time. She crawled as fast as she could, the metal scraping against her arms. "Marcus, hurry," she called, glancing back to see if he was following. "Almost there," he shouted back, his voice strained. She felt a rush of admiration for him. He was putting himself at risk for her. Finally, Lyra reached the end of the vent and dropped down into another room. She landed softly on the ground and quickly looked around. It was a small control room, filled with buttons and screens. "Lyra," Marcus called from behind her. She turned just in time to see him emerge from the vent, his body twisting to fit through the small opening. He landed beside her, breathing heavily but looking ready to fight. "Now what?" she asked, her voice filled with urgency. "Let's disable the security system," he replied, moving toward the control panel. "If we can shut down the alarms, we can make it to the ship." Lyra nodded, watching as he began pressing buttons. She could hear the distant roars of the Zorathians growing louder, and she knew they didn't have much time. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered, and Marcus turned to her, a look of determination on his face. "I need you to keep watch. If you see anything, warn me." Lyra's heart raced as she positioned herself by the door, peering out into the hallway. She felt scared but also strong. With Marcus by her side, she believed they could escape. As Marcus worked, she heard the Zorathians' voices growing closer. "They must be here somewhere," one of them yelled. "Stay quiet," Marcus urged, his fingers flying over the controls. Lyra's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of their lives in her hands, but she was ready to face the danger. Together, they would find a way out. The Zorathians would not take her freedom without a fight. "Just a little longer," Marcus said, his eyes focused. Lyra took a deep breath, ready to defend them both. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment to be brave and to escape. The escape. Lyra stood by the door, her heart racing, as she listened to the Zorathians searching for them. The sounds of their angry voices echoed through the hallways, and the air felt thick with tension. She glanced over at Marcus, who was focused on the control panel, his fingers moving quickly over the buttons. "Are we almost ready?" she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just a few more seconds," Marcus replied, his eyes locked on the screen. "If I can disable the security system, we'll have a chance to escape." Lyra nodded, biting her lip. She could hear the Zorathians getting closer. Panic bubbled up inside her, but she forced herself to breathe deeply. She needed to stay calm. Marcus was relying on her to keep watch. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and a loud crash echoed from the hallway. "They're getting closer," Lyra exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. "Stay alert," Marcus shouted, not taking his eyes off the screen. "We're almost there." Lyra peered out into the hallway, her heart pounding. She could see shadows moving, and the Zorathians were searching every room. She gripped the doorframe, ready to shout a warning if they got too close. Come on," she whispered to herself, willing Marcus to finish. She felt the weight of fear settle over her like a heavy blanket. What if they found them? What if they were captured again? At that moment, Marcus turned to her, his face filled with urgency. "I did it," he said. "The alarms are down." "Great, let's go," Lyra replied, relief flooding through her. They didn't have time to waste. Marcus pushed the door open, and they stepped out into the dark corridor. Lyra felt a rush of adrenaline as they moved quickly, staying low and silent. Every shadow seemed to hide danger, but with Marcus by her side, she felt stronger. They darted down the hallway, weaving around corners and ducking behind obstacles. Lyra's heart raced with fear and excitement. She was no longer a captive. She was a part of the action, and it felt incredible. As they moved deeper into the base, the sounds of the Zorathians grew louder behind them. "This way," Marcus shouted, leading her toward a narrow passageway. Lyra followed closely, her breath coming in quick bursts. They reached a large door at the end of the corridor, and Marcus quickly punched in a code. The door hissed open, revealing a vast room filled with strange machinery. In the center of the room stood a small ship, its metallic surface gleaming under the flickering lights. "There it is," Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with hope. "That's our way out." Lyra's heart soared at the sight of the ship. She had imagined freedom for so long, and now it was within reach. "Let's get on board," she urged, excitement bubbling inside her. They sprinted toward the ship, but just as they reached it, the alarms blared back to life. The Zorathians had figured out they were escaping. "Quick, get inside," Marcus shouted, pushing Lyra ahead of him. She climbed into the ship, her heart pounding. "Start it up," Marcus ordered, his voice filled with urgency. "I don't know how," Lyra exclaimed, panic creeping into her voice. "Just follow the lights," Marcus called as he leaped inside, slamming the door shut behind him. He quickly moved to the control panel, his fingers flying over the buttons. "We have to go now." Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath to calm herself. She focused on the colorful lights flashing on the panel. "What do I do?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hit that green button," Marcus pointed, and Lyra pressed it without hesitation. The ship roared to life, and she felt a jolt of excitement rush through her. "Now what?" she asked, watching Marcus closely. "Throttle up. Pull that lever," he instructed, and Lyra did as he said. The ship began to rise off the ground, shaking slightly as it prepared for takeoff. "Hold on," Marcus warned, gripping the control panel as they felt the ship lift into the air. The Zorathians were outside, pounding on the doors, desperate to catch them. With a loud roar, the ship shot upward, breaking through the ceiling and into the open sky. Lyra gasped at the sight before her. The dark planet stretched out below them, a sea of purple and black. For the first time, she felt a sense of freedom washing over her. "We did it," she exclaimed, her voice filled with joy. "Not yet," Marcus replied, his expression serious as he focused on the controls. "We have to get out of their range." Lyra watched as the Zorathian base shrank beneath them. They were escaping, but she could still see the aliens running around, their angry voices echoing in the distance. The feeling of victory mingled with the thrill of danger. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her heart still racing from the excitement. "Just hold on. I'll navigate us to a safe zone," Marcus replied, determination in his voice. Lyra nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude for him. He had saved her, and together they were flying away from the horrors of the Zorathian base. She was no longer a captive. She was a survivor. As the ship soared into the stars, Lyra knew they had made it. The darkness of the planet faded behind them, and ahead lay the vastness of space. Freedom was theirs, and nothing could take that away. In that moment, as the stars twinkled around them, Lyra felt a spark of hope. She was ready for whatever came next, and she would face it with Marcus by her side. Together, they would create a new story, one filled with adventure and freedom. "Only if they attack us first," he replied. "We need to defend ourselves, but I want to avoid a fight if we can." Lyra nodded, her hands gripping the edges of her seat. She could see the Zorathian ships getting closer, their engines roaring. The tension in the cockpit grew thick, and Lyra could feel the weight of their danger pressing down on her. "Here we go," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He activated the ship's weapons, and the console lit up with green lights. The Zorathian ships closed in, their weapons charging. "Get ready," Marcus shouted as he maneuvered the ship to dodge an incoming blast. The ship swerved sharply, and Lyra felt her stomach drop. They barely avoided the blast, but the Zorathians were relentless. "They're on our tail," Marcus yelled, determination in his voice. "We have to shake them off." Lyra clenched her fists, adrenaline surging through her. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice rising above the roar of the engines. "Just keep an eye on the scanners," Marcus instructed. If they come close, let me know. As they sped through the stars, Lyra focused on the scanners, her heart racing with every beep. She could see the Zorathian ships behind them, gaining ground. Fear washed over her, but she pushed it aside. They would escape. They had to. Marcus, they're getting closer, she shouted, her voice filled with urgency. I see them, he replied, his hand steady on the controls. Hold on tight. With a swift maneuver, he turned the ship sharply, trying to lose the Zorathians in a nearby asteroid field. The ship shuddered as it dodged rocks and debris, and Lyra felt her heart leap into her throat. Keep going, she urged, feeling the thrill of danger rush through her. They had to escape, together. As they entered the field, the Zorathian ships followed, but the asteroids created obstacles. Lyra felt a spark of hope. Maybe they could lose them in the chaos of the rocks. Stay focused, Marcus shouted, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. We can do this. Lyra nodded, determination filling her. Together, they would find a way out of this danger, no matter what it took. The safe spot. After what felt like an eternity of dodging asteroids, Marcus finally pulled the ship into a small, hidden cave nestled in the rocks. The darkness enveloped them, and he quickly activated the ship's stealth mode again. The engine quieted, and the flickering lights dimmed. Did we lose them? Lyra asked, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the chase. I think so, Marcus replied, his voice tense. He glanced at the scanners, watching for any signs of the Zorathian ships. But we can't relax yet. We need to stay alert. Lyra nodded, her hands shaking slightly. The danger had been real, and the close call left her feeling breathless. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. What's the plan now? She asked. Marcus turned to her, his expression serious. We wait here for a little while. The Zorathians will likely search the asteroid field, but this cave should keep us hidden. Once things settle down, we can make our next move. Lyra looked around the small cockpit. It was cramped, with wires and buttons everywhere. The dim light made the space feel even smaller. What if they find us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. They won't, Marcus reassured her. But if they do, we'll be ready. We can defend ourselves. Lyra felt a mix of fear and determination. They had made it this far, and she didn't want to give up now. What can I do to help? She asked, wanting to be useful. Keep an eye on the scanners, Marcus replied, pointing to the control panel. If you see any ships approaching, let me know right away. Okay, Lyra said, feeling a sense of purpose. She settled into her seat, her eyes fixed on the scanner as they waited in silence. The cave felt still, but the tension in the air was palpable. Time passed slowly. The sounds of the ship's systems hummed softly, and Lyra could hear her own breathing. She glanced at Marcus, who was staring intently at the screen, his jaw clenched. Are you okay? She asked, concerned. I'm just thinking, he replied, his tone distant. About what comes next. We can't stay here forever. We need to find a way to get to the human outpost. Right, Lyra said, nodding. But how do we do that without getting caught? First, we'll check the scanners. If the coast is clear, we can leave the cave. We'll have to be cautious, Marcus explained. I'll fly low and keep to the asteroid field. If we're lucky, we can slip past any Zorathian ships. Lyra felt a surge of hope at his plan. What if we can find a way to signal the outpost for help? She suggested. Maybe they can send a ship to meet us. Marcus looked thoughtful. That could work, but we need to be careful. If we signal them, it might also alert the Zorathians. Lyra bit her lip, considering this. We could use a code that only the outpost would understand. It might be risky, but it's worth a try. Marcus nodded, impressed. Good idea. Let's keep that in mind for later. He glanced at the scanners again, his expression serious. For now, Let's just wait and see if it's safe to move." After another long stretch of silence, the scanner beeped, breaking the tension in the air. Lyra jumped, her heart racing. "What is it?" she asked quickly. "Just some small ships in the distance," Marcus said, frowning as he studied the screen. "Nothing Zorethian. They look like cargo ships. They might belong to the outpost." Lyra felt a rush of excitement. "Could they help us?" "It's possible," Marcus replied, his brow furrowing. "But we need to be sure. I'll keep watching, and if they get closer, we can think about sending a signal." Minutes stretched into hours as they waited. Lyra watched the scanners closely, her heart in her throat. The tension in the air was thick as they kept an eye out for any signs of danger. Finally, as the shadows began to deepen outside the cave, Marcus leaned back in his seat and sighed. "Looks like the Zorethians are gone for now," he said. "We should take a chance and try to reach the outpost." Lyra's heart raced at the thought of moving again. "What do we do?" "First, we'll exit the cave slowly. I'll take us low to the ground and use the rocks for cover," Marcus explained. "Once we're clear, we'll head towards the coordinates I have for the outpost." "Got it," Lyra said, feeling a surge of determination. They were about to take a big step toward freedom. "Okay, here we go," Marcus said, his voice steady. He powered up the ship, and they felt a gentle vibration as the engines came to life. As they carefully maneuvered out of the cave, Lyra held her breath. The darkness of the cave gave way to the starry sky, and she felt a rush of adrenaline. They were leaving the safety of the cave, but the thrill of freedom filled her. The ship glided into the open air, and Marcus flew low, weaving through the rocks to avoid detection. Lyra's heart raced as they approached the area where the cargo ships had been spotted. "Look," she pointed excitedly. "There's one of the ships." Marcus's eyes narrowed as he spotted the cargo vessel hovering in the distance. "Let's get closer," he said, carefully guiding the ship toward it. As they neared the cargo ship, Lyra could see it was large and bulky, with antennas and cargo containers piled high. "It looks like a transport ship," she said. "Do you think they can help us?" "I hope so," Marcus replied. "We just need to make contact without drawing attention." He activated the communication system, and Lyra watched closely as he prepared to send a signal. "Here goes," he said, pressing a button. A beam of light shot from their ship toward the cargo vessel, a simple code that identified them as humans in distress. "Now we wait," Marcus said, glancing at the scanners again. Lyra held her breath, praying for a response. Would they be noticed? Would they help? A few tense moments passed, and then the radio crackled to life. "This is the cargo ship Mercury. We see your signal. What is your status?" Lyra's heart soared. "We made contact," she exclaimed. "This is Marcus," he replied, his voice steady. "We need assistance. We escaped from Zorethian captivity and are trying to reach the human outpost. Can you help us?" "Understood. Stand by for further instructions," the voice on the other end replied. Lyra exchanged a glance with Marcus, relief washing over her. They were no longer alone in this fight. Together, they would find their way to safety. The final fight. The cargo ship Mercury approached them slowly, its massive hull reflecting the starlight. Lyra watched in awe as it grew closer, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. They had made contact, and help was on the way. "Stay sharp," Marcus said, his voice low but urgent. "We don't know if the Zorethians are still out there. We need to be ready for anything." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding. She glanced at the scanners, watching for any signs of danger. The cockpit felt charged with energy, and she could sense the tension in the air. They had come so far, and now they were on the brink of safety. As the Mercury drew closer, the radio crackled again. "This is Captain Rhea of the Mercury. We have your coordinates. Prepare to receive us." "Copy that," Marcus replied, his hand steady on the controls. "We're ready to board." "Stay in your ship. We'll extend our docking bay," Captain Rhea instructed. Lyra watched as the cargo ship moved into position. A long tube extended from the Mercury, connecting to their ship. "Here we go," Marcus said, a determined look on his face. As they docked, Lyra felt a wave of hope wash over her. They were so close to freedom. But just as they prepared to board, the scanners beeped loudly. "Marcus," Lyra shouted, her heart racing. "There's a Zorathian ship approaching fast." "Damn it," Marcus swore under his breath. "We don't have time. We need to get inside the Mercury now." They quickly unbuckled their seatbelts and dashed toward the docking bay. Lyra's heart raced as they stepped through the airlock, entering the cargo ship. "Close the door," Marcus yelled, pressing the button to seal a hatch. The door slid shut just as they heard the distant roar of the Zorathian ship outside. They had made it inside, but the danger was far from over. "What now?" Lyra asked, glancing around the large bay filled with crates and equipment. "We need to find Captain Rhea," Marcus said, scanning the area. "She'll know what to do." They moved quickly through the cargo ship, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the metal hallways. The atmosphere was tense, and Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. They were safe for now, but she could still feel the threat of the Zorathians looming over them. As they reached the bridge, Marcus knocked on the door. "Captain Rhea." "It's Marcus and Lyra." "Come in," came the captain's voice, and they pushed the door open. Inside, Captain Rhea stood at the control panel, her expression focused. "Glad to see you both safe," she said, her eyes narrowing at the screens. "But we have a problem." "What's happening?" Marcus asked, his voice tense. "The Zorathians are scanning for our signal." "They know you're here," Rhea explained, her fingers flying over the controls. "We need to act fast." Lyra felt a knot form in her stomach. "What can we do?" "We have to prepare for a fight," Rhea replied. "We'll be outnumbered, but we can use the cargo bay as a defensive position. We can set up a barricade and fight them off." Marcus nodded, determination in his eyes. "Let's do it. We can't let them take us back." They quickly moved to the cargo bay, gathering crates and supplies to create a makeshift barricade. Lyra felt a surge of adrenaline as she helped Marcus stack the crates, her mind racing with the reality of their situation. "Do you think they'll come for us?" she asked, her voice shaky. "They will," Marcus said firmly. "They won't let us go that easily." As they finished setting up the barricade, Rhea's voice crackled over the intercom. "They're here. Prepare yourselves." Lyra felt her heart pound in her chest. The Zorathians were close, and they were ready for a fight. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Remember, we have to hold them off until we can get the ship moving," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Stay focused, and don't panic." Lyra nodded, feeling a rush of determination. She would fight alongside Marcus and Rhea. They were a team now, and they would not back down. Suddenly, the doors to the cargo bay slammed open, and a group of Zorathian soldiers rushed in, their weapons drawn. Lyra's heart raced as she grabbed a nearby blaster, her hands shaking. "Fire!" Rhea shouted, and the room erupted in chaos. Lyra fired her weapon, aiming carefully at the approaching Zorathians. The shots echoed in the confined space, and she felt a surge of adrenaline as she fought back. Marcus was beside her, his focus unwavering as he covered her. "Watch your left," he shouted, dodging behind a crate as a Zorathian soldier returned fire. Lyra turned and fired again, feeling the heat of the battle coursing through her veins. She was no longer a captive. She was a fighter. The Zorathians advanced, but they were met with fierce resistance. Rhea shouted commands, directing their fire and helping them stay organized. "Keep it together," she urged. "We can hold them off." Lyra felt a rush of pride at being part of this fight. She was no longer afraid. She was standing up for herself and for her freedom. As the battle raged on, the sound of blaster fire filled the air. Lyra's arms ached from firing, but she didn't stop. She was determined to protect what they had fought so hard to achieve. Suddenly, A loud explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered, and debris fell from the ceiling. What was that? Marcus yelled, his eyes wide with concern. They must have hit the main power, Rhea shouted. We need to stabilize it, or we'll lose the ship. Can you fix it? Marcus asked, glancing between Rhea and Lyra. I'll try, Rhea replied, moving quickly toward the control panel. You two hold them off. Lyra and Marcus exchanged a glance, knowing the stakes were high. They had to protect Rhea and buy her time. With renewed determination, they stepped back into the fray, firing at the advancing Zorathians. The heat of battle surged around them, and Lyra felt alive. This was her moment to fight for her freedom. Keep pushing, Marcus shouted, dodging behind a crate to reload. We can't let them through. Lyra nodded, her heart racing with each blast. They were so close to victory. They just had to hold on a little longer. As the fight continued, the Zorathians began to retreat. Lyra felt a surge of hope as they fell back, their numbers dwindling. We're pushing them back, she exclaimed. Keep it up, Marcus shouted, his voice filled with adrenaline. Finally, with a final blast, the last Zorathian soldier fell, and the cargo bay fell silent. Breathing heavily, Lyra looked around at the wreckage. They had done it. They had fought back and won. Rhea, are you okay? Marcus called out. Just about, she replied, her voice strained but determined. We need to get the ship moving before more come. Lyra's heart raced with excitement and relief. They had survived the battle, but the fight was not over yet. Together, they would continue to fight for their freedom and make sure they would never be captured again. The new life. After the fierce battle, the cargo ship Mercury drifted quietly through space, far away from the danger of the Zorathians. The air was filled with a sense of calm, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just endured. Lyra leaned against the wall of the bridge, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the fight. Did we really do it? She asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. Are we safe now? The woman's expression softened. Of course, we have programs designed to help people like you. Let's sit down and discuss your options. As they spoke with the woman, Lyra listened closely, absorbing every word. They discussed housing, jobs, and resources available for those who had escaped captivity. It all felt overwhelming, but in a good way. You'll have a place to stay, and we can help you find work that suits your skills, the woman explained. You'll be safe here. Tears filled Lyra's eyes at the thought of finally having a place to call home. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. After the meeting, they left the Welcome Center, feeling hopeful about their future. The weight of their past was still heavy, but it felt lighter knowing they had a chance to start anew. I can't believe we're finally here, Marcus said, looking around at the vibrant surroundings. This is going to be our new life. Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. We made it. We really did. As they walked through the outpost, the sounds of laughter and life filled the air. They were no longer prisoners. They were free. Together, they would build their new lives, filled with hope and possibility. Lyra felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. She had Marcus and Rhea by her side, and together they would create a future worth fighting for.